I always thought our life was peaceful. Every morning, I'd wake up before Michael making coffee, opening the curtains, and letting sunlight fill our small living room on the outskirts of town. 32 years of marriage, and everything felt simple, yet full of happiness. Our kids are grown now. Our son, Daniel, just married a wonderful girl, Emma. I remember the first time I met her. The way she bowed her head politely. The way she called me Mama Helen with a warm smile. I was immediately taken with her. Our home felt alive again after they moved in. Temporarily while their house was being renovated, I was happy. Michael seemed happy too, or maybe too happy. At first, I thought I was just imagining things. But there was a certain way Michael would look at Emma. It wasn't lust, nor was it love, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It wasn't just admiration. It was like he was remembering something. I didn't jump to conclusions. We're old, after all. Maybe I was just being too sensitive. But when I saw Michael quietly fixing Emma's broken necklaces, hands shaking, his eyes wistful, my heart started to feel strange. "Mike," I said that night, "you're paying more attention to Emma than usual, aren't you?" He chuckled softly. "Ah, you're over Helen," but his eyes didn't meet mine when he answered. From that night on, I started noticing more little things: the way Michael would smile whenever Emma laughed, the way he'd look at her from afar during dinner, even the way he'd fall silent when Emma talked about her past at the orphanage. There was something between them, something that wasn't just coincidence, and for the first time in 32 years, I felt like my home wasn't safe anymore. I don't know what's going on, but I know I'm going to find out, because there's no greater pain than realizing that the person you trusted completely is holding a secret that could destroy everything. I don't know what's happening, but I know I'll find out, because there's no greater pain than realizing the person you trusted completely is hiding secrets that could destroy everything. Sometimes, the oddities don't come in grand forms. They come quietly, subtly, in the form of small things we overlook. My days went by as usual. I'd cook, tidy up the small garden in the backyard, and listen to the sound of laughter from the living room. Michael and Emma's laughter. I'd smile. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. Michael wasn't the type of man who talked much, but since Emma had moved in, he seemed more alive. He'd often praise her cooking, tell long stories during dinner, and even started painting against something he hadn't touched in years. I was happy, but also scared. Scared because I knew my husband's face when he fell in love with something. One afternoon, I saw them both in the garden. Emma was sitting on a bench, reading a book. Michael stood behind her, watching, and then said softly, "Greater than don't move. The evening light is beautiful." He picked up his sketchbook and began to draw. I stood behind the window, silent. That gaze, it wasn't the gaze of a father-in-law towards his daughter-in-law. It was the gaze of someone trying to remember something lost. That night, I mustered the courage to ask, "Greater than, you were drawing Emma, weren't you?" He smiled faintly. "Just practicing. Her face is easy to draw." "Soft. You never said things like that about my face," I replied softly. He chuckled briefly, but his eyes dropped. "Ah, Helen, you're being jealous." I laughed along, but there was a salty taste at the tip of my tongue, bitter feeling I couldn't quite put into words. A few days later, I was cleaning Michael's workspace. Underneath a pile of papers and watercolors, I found something, an unfinished painting. Emma's face so alive, so gentle. But in the corner, there was another figure, a little girl, with the same hair, the same eyes, and below it, a small inscription in pencil, "Greater than I still remember you." I froze. Who was that girl? And why did the painting feel so personal? I wanted to ask, but my lips couldn't move. That night, when we had dinner together, Michael seemed very calm. Too calm, like someone hiding something fragile. "Greater than, Mike," I said softly. "Emma looks a lot like someone, doesn't she?" He looked at me for a moment, then said, "Yes." "Maybe who?" He just smiled slightly. "Someone from the past." I didn't sleep that night. Those words echoed in my head. Someone from the past. Since when did the past have a face? And why did that face look so much like my daughter? I knew I had to find out. But something inside me was also afraid. Afraid of the answer. I might find that it would destroy everything. Sometimes, the greatest danger isn't the secrets others keep, but our own courage to uncover them. That night, I sat in the living room alone. The table lamp was dimly lit, and on my lap the painting I had found earlier that day. Emma's face on the canvas seemed to gaze back at me, with eyes that held something. My curiosity turned to anxiety. What did that small inscription mean? I still remember you. Remember who? The next morning, I pretended I didn't know anything. But in my heart, I was watching Michael's every move. He sat on the back porch, with a cup of coffee and a distant gaze. His right hand held a pen, but he wasn't drawing. He was writing. When he went inside to answer a call, I saw the paper on his desk. Not a sketch, a letter. His handwriting was slightly shaky, but I recognized it. The sentence had only 3 lines. Greater than to you, whom I never got to hug. I see you every day, in someone else's face. Forgive me, my chest felt tight. I didn't know what was more terrifying, the content of the letter, or the fact that it hadn't been sent to anyone. That afternoon, I decided to enter his workspace again. I placed his old paintings on the floor, one by one. Some were landscapes, some portraits. But among them, there was one that was different. A little girl's face. Around 8 years old, dark brown hair, big bright eyes. And in the bottom right corner of the painting, there was a date. Year Michael and I had been married for 2 years. I tried to remember. Was there something he was hiding from me back then? I remembered a time when Michael was suddenly depressed for months. He said it was because he lost an old friend. I believed him, because I had no reason to doubt him. But now, looking at all this, I started to feel like my whole life was built on partial truths. Not the entire truth. A few days later, Emma was helping me clean the storage room. Suddenly, she found a small dusty box in the corner. "Can I open it, Mom?" she asked. I nodded. Inside, there were stacks of old photos and a yellow envelope I had never opened. The photos were black and white, some of them had yellowed. In one of them, I saw a young Michael standing in front of a small house, with a young woman I didn't recognize, and a baby girl in her arms. My hands were shaking. Emma looked at me. "Is that Dad?" I swallowed. "Yeah, I think so. Who's the woman?" I shook my head. "I don't know, sweetie, but in my heart, I knew the woman wasn't just anyone. She was a part of Michael's past that he was trying to bury." That night, I confronted my husband. Greater than Mike, I found something in the storage room. He looked at me for a long time, then looked down. "You found the photos, didn't you?" "Yes. That was a long time ago. Helen, I thought I had thrown all of them away." His voice was heavy. Then he said softly, almost inaudibly, "Greater than the child in the photo. Didn't survive for long. At least, that's what I thought." I was silent. "Greater than... You thought so?" "Yes, her mother left. I never knew what happened after that." There was genuine sadness on his face. But for some reason, I didn't fully believe him. Not because he was lying, but because there was something he wasn't telling me. The next day, as Emma and I were talking in the kitchen, she casually mentioned something greater than I grew up in an orphanage. "Mom, but I don't know who my parents are. I only had a worn-out letter. But it's been lost for a long time." I looked at her silently. Her voice trembled slightly when she said that. And suddenly, the scattered pieces in my head started to fit together. First mini twist. Emma doesn't know who her parents are. Michael lost a daughter in the past. And Emma's face looked a lot like the little girl in the painting. I stood by the window that night, staring at the dark sky. The rain fell gently. In my heart, I whispered, "Greater than God. What are you showing me?" It felt like watching a film of my own life. But from a different angle, the side I had never known. Greater than... If Emma is indeed a part of Michael's past, then it means I'm living with a secret that could destroy my family. Sometimes, we think what we see is sin. But it's actually regret that's too deep to be put into words. I couldn't sleep that night. Questions swirled in my head like a broken clock that wouldn't stop. Who was Emma really? And what was the... connection between Michael's past and the little girl in the painting. Every time I looked at Emma's face, something felt familiar, but not because she was my daughter. Deeper than that, like a face I had seen before, maybe in a photo, or perhaps in Michael's hidden memories. The next morning, I mustered the courage to open Michael's workspace again. The key to the drawer was easy to find. I had been married to him for too long not to know where he hid things. In the bottom drawer, I found an old brown box. Inside, old letters with yellowed paper, some photos, and a small heart-shaped necklace that was rusted at the edges. My hands trembled as I read one of the letters. Michael's handwriting, dated February 1996, a year after the date on the painting. Greater than, to my child who may never read this, I don't know where you are now, but every time I paint, I see your eyes on the canvas. If one day you read this, forgive your father. I wasn't brave enough to look for you. I closed the letter, my eyes welling up with tears. Michael had been keeping a secret this big, in the same house, under the same roof as me. I waited until night fell. Michael fell asleep in the living room chair, the TV still softly playing. I sat in front of him, staring at his aging face. Greater than, how long, Mike? I whispered. How long have you been carrying this alone? He slowly woke up, looking at me with tired eyes. Greater than, you found the letters, didn't you? I nodded. I just want to know, I said softly, why you never told me. Michael looked down. Greater than, I was afraid of losing you, Helen. That was a past I even wanted to forget. I thought the child was gone. I didn't even know if she was still alive. I took a deep breath. Greater than, but what if she's alive, Mike? He was silent for a long time. I don't know. Maybe God wants me to know. Through this painful way, I knew what he meant. And in that moment, my heart trembled because I started to see something I hadn't understood before. The way Michael looked at Emma, not with love, but with deep guilt. A few days later, I decided to find out for myself. I went to the orphanage where Emma used to live. The building was old. The walls were filled with photos of children from the past. An elderly woman, the head of the orphanage, greeted me warmly. Greater than, Emma, she said, closing her eyes trying to remember. Oh, that girl was so sweet. She was found at our doorstep around 1996. There was no identification, just a small piece of paper. I swallowed. Greater than, what kind of paper? The woman smiled faintly. Ah, just a few words. I've kept it in the old archives. She went away for a moment, then returned with a worn folder. From it, she pulled out a small, browned piece of paper, half torn. The handwriting on it was faint, but I recognized it instantly. It was Michael's handwriting. Greater than, to my child, forgive your father. The world seemed to stop spinning. I stared at the paper for a long time. My hands were shaking, my tears fell before I could hold them back. Emma, the one I had called daughter-in-law, the one I had treated like my own child, was Michael's biological daughter. I went home in silence. Every step towards the house felt heavy. In my head, one sentence kept repeating. Greater than, what if the love I've been protecting all this time was built on dark secrets? That night, I stood in front of Michael's room. He looked at me with a confused expression. I held the letter in my hand. Greater than, Mike, I said softly. I know who Emma really is. The only sound that came from his lips was a whisper. Greater than, so, you finally know. I stared at him for a long time, and for the first time in our long life together, didn't know whether I wanted to hug him or leave him. Greater than, the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it destroys the peace we've guarded our whole lives. That night, the rain fell gently outside the window. The house felt quiet, but inside my chest, my heart was noisy and uncontrollable. I stood in front of Michael, still holding the letter. The paper was wet with tears, whether mine or his. I didn't know. Greater than, Helen, he finally said, his voice hoarse. You need to know everything. I sat down slowly. The coffee on the table was cold. I looked at him for a long time, waiting for the next sentence to come out of his mouth. The sentence that might change my entire life. Michael took a deep breath. Greater than, before I met you, he said softly, I loved someone. Her name was Grace. We were young, foolish, and careless. When she got pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready. I left before I even knew the child was born. He paused for a moment, staring at the floor. Greater than. Years later, I tried to find her. But Grace had moved, and I heard the child was sick and might not survive. I closed that chapter of my life forever. Helen, I thought I had made up for it by being a good husband and father to you. I looked at his face, the face I used to know so well, now felt foreign, greater than. And that child, Emma, he nodded slowly. I didn't know when I first met her. But when I looked into her eyes, I knew. His voice cracked. Greater than. I knew, Helen. I knew before you even realized it. I was silent. All words escaped my mind. I wanted to be angry, to scream, but my body wouldn't move. How could I be angry when what I saw in front of me wasn't a deceiver, but an old man, haunted by decades of regret? Greater than. Why didn't you tell me from the start? I finally asked. Because I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of destroying Daniel and Emma. I just wanted to protect them all. Outside, thunder boomed. The sound of the rain swallowed the silence between us. Greater than. So all this time, I said softly, you've been keeping the secret that your daughter is your biological daughter, and you let our son marry her without knowing. Tears fell down his cheeks. Greater than. I don't know how to stop it without destroying everything. I was hoping God would stop it for me. I closed my eyes. Tears streaming down my face. Greater than. And now, I just want to be honest. Even if it means losing everything. A few days after that night, Daniel and Emma decided to separate amicably. There were no screams, no anger, just tears and apologies that didn't know who they were directed to. I saw Emma for the last time in the front yard of the house. She hugged me tightly, like a child who didn't want to leave. Greater than. Mom, Helen, she said softly, I don't know where to go, but I'm grateful that for the first time in my life, I know who I am. I hugged her back, holding back tears. Greater than. You're still my child, Emma. Nothing can change that night. Michael and I sat together in the living room. Silent, he looked at me. His face tired but relieved. Greater than. I'm not worthy of forgiveness, he said softly. Maybe not, I replied. But I'm tired of hating. Sometimes, love doesn't save us, Mike. But it's also what makes us choose not to give up. He looked at me for a long time, then cried for the first time in 30 years that night. I realized, lies aren't always born from bad intentions. Sometimes, it's just a way for someone to bear the guilt that's too heavy to share. The house now feels like a museum of memories. Every corner holds the shadows of laughter that used to echo through it now. Only the echo of my footsteps remains. Daniel had moved out. Emma left a short letter on the dining table before she left. Greater than sorry. Mom, I need time to forgive myself. I read the letter over and over, until the ink at the edge began to fade from my own tears. Michael has been quiet a lot lately. He often sits on the back porch, staring at the garden he used to tend to with Emma. His hands tremble every time he tries to paint, but his canvas is always blank. Greater than. I can't do it anymore, he said one afternoon. Every time I pick up the brush, all I see are the faces I've hurt. I sat beside him, bringing 2 cups of tea. We didn't talk for long. Some things don't need to be explained, just understood in silence. Time passed slowly. Days turned into weeks. People started asking questions. Neighbors started whispering. The news of Daniel and Emma's sudden separation spread without being able to be stopped. I just smiled every time someone asked. Greater than. They need time, I said. Even though deep down I knew time isn't always the cure. Sometimes time just teaches wounds to be silent. One night, I found Michael sitting alone in his study. The small lamp on his desk was dimly lit. In front of him was a new painting, but this time, it was different. Not Emma's face. Not the backyard garden. But my face. The face of an old woman with tired eyes, yet still looking straight ahead. Greater than. I want to remember you like this, Helen, he said softly. Not because I deserve you, but because you stayed here when I couldn't. bear to look at myself anymore. I stared at the painting for a long time. There was beauty in the unforced sadness. My tears fell, but I smiled. A few days later, Michael fell ill. The doctor said it was just exhaustion. But I knew sometimes it's not the body that's sick, but the soul that's carried regret for too long. I stayed by his side every night, holding his hand tightly. And in between his tired sleep, he whispered softly, "Greater than Helen, thank you for not leaving," I replied in a voice barely audible. "Greater than, I'm still here, Mike, but I don't know if I'm still whole." That night, I wrote something in my journal. Greater than, maybe love doesn't have to be perfect to be love. Sometimes love lives in the cracks that can't be fixed. I closed the book slowly. Outside, the rain had stopped. And for the first time in a long time, I looked up at the sky without fear. Greater than, life, I whispered, isn't always about who's wrong, but about who still chooses to stay even when everything falls apart. That morning, the first rays of sunlight streamed through the bedroom window. For the first time in months, I didn't feel afraid of the new day. I walked to the kitchen, preparing tea as I always did. There were 2 cups on the table, one for me, one for someone who could no longer drink it. Michael had passed away a week ago, peacefully in his sleep, without any regret on his face, just a small smile that made me cry all night. Next to his bed, I found a short letter in his own handwriting. Greater than, Helen, if morning comes and I'm no longer there, don't spend the rest of your life remembering my mistakes. I don't want to be remembered for the pain, but for the love that was real. I read the letter over and over. Every letter felt like a prayer that soothed the wound. A few weeks went by. Daniel finally came back after being gone for a long time. He looked older, calmer. We sat in the backyard, where it all began. Greater than, I met Emma, Mom, he said softly. We're not together anymore, but we're okay now. I smiled, looking at the flowers that were starting to grow again by the garden. Greater than, that's the most important thing, dear. Not all love has to be possessed. Sometimes, it's enough to remember it with a good prayer. That evening, I opened Michael's workspace for the last time. There were paintings he hadn't touched. But in the corner of the desk, I found a new painting, a painting of the sunrise over our garden. Below it, there was a small inscription, greater than when morning comes. My love will stay here, I smiled, holding back tears. This time, it wasn't because of sadness, but because I knew I had finally reached the end of a long journey and I was still alive. I stared at the painting for a long time, then spoke softly, as if he could still hear me. Greater than, I've forgiven you, Mike, because love was never meant to be perfect, just to teach us how to be human. The day grew darker. I lit a small candle on the table, writing one final sentence in my journal. Greater than, and when morning comes, I won't be searching for lost love anymore. I'll just be grateful for having felt it, even if just for a moment.